Hi, everybody. Welcome to Queers and Soaps. I'm Tommy, and today I'm joined by Lynn.
Greetings.
And today we are covering a new TV show for the podcast, Felicity, which aired on the WB from 1998 to 2002. So I'll
Yes.
roll the credits, and we will jump right into it. Okay, so did you watch this from like when it originally aired, from like the pilot on?
I remember seeing the ads for this and being intrigued by it, and I don't remember watching it though. I think I was one of those. It was one of those things where this show was on either like a Tuesday or Wednesday night, and it was during the work week, and I just was having a hard time adding something else to the watch list during that time. But I think, I was definitely probably one of those people watching live TV during that time of 1998, 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, came across it and maybe paused on it. And I was like, oh, it looks good, but I just didn't commit into it. I waited until I don't know what the deal was. I think it started maybe going into syndication. No, it was the DVDs came out and about season one of the DVDs because they started issuing, I think, the DVDs on the last year of the series. And so then I was kind of doing double duty. I was then watching it, several seasons in regularly and then backlogging and rewatching from
Oh,
season one on.
okay.
How about you? Do you remember?
So the WB was still a fairly new network at the time. I think they had only been around maybe 2 or 3 years,
Yes.
and they were known for, like, their sitcoms on Sunday nights, and they had, like, a few dramas. They had, like, Seventh Heaven, and then they added Buffy, was a mid-season replacement for Savannah when they canceled that.
Huge for them. Yep,
Um,
exactly.
and then I think midway through Buffy's 2nd season, that's when they did a mid-season, show, Dawson's Creek, because they were adding a night. So I think
Right.
they, at that point, then had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Buffy moved
Got it.
from after Seventh Heaven on Mondays to Tuesdays. So I
Right.
think this season, 98, 99, was the first season that they may have had a full week.
Oh,
Um, I think they moved Dawson's Creek to Wednesdays, and I believe Felicity came on right after it on Wednesday nights.
got it. I just remember too, even maybe like into year two, maybe even was going into year three, that
Mhm.
they would take select members of the cast of all these shows too and do like a party event. You know what I mean? They'd film
Yeah.
like promo bumpers and stuff and they all be dancing around, the lights would be going and it's like only on the WB and you'd see the
Yeah.
big WB logo lighted up and
Uh-huh.
stuff like that. It's kind of
Ugh, I
cool.
loved it.
Well, they really
So
were going for that youth demographic and trying to pull it in, and they were. I mean, those shows were quite popular at the time.
I mean, I definitely was in the demo because I was around 12 or 13 when this came
Got
out.
it?
And so I pretty much watched everything that was on the WB. And I knew Kerry Russell from the Mickey Mouse Club. So when I
Cute.
saw her, I was like, "Oh my god, it's the girl from the Mickey Mouse Club."
And I think I saw her on like things like, believe it or not, she did like one episode of Married with Children, and she did
Oh,
maybe some different nighttime movies and stuff like that too. And she's just, I mean, gorgeous girl, beautiful, big hair, just a knockout. And it was so interesting how they cast her as muted little Felicity, and even Steve, no, Scott Speedman said like when they were casting her, or when he, I think, auditioned opposite of her, he was saying, there's no way that she's going to be Felicity. She's just way too pretty. And the show did kind of like make her a little bit more plain Jane and stuff like
yeah.
that, and put the big sweaters on and not a lot of makeup at all and stuff like that to make her very much be that girl next door.
Also, Amy Jo Johnson, who's on the show, was the Pink Ranger, and I was really into Power Rangers. So I'm like, I
Were
got the
you?
Mouse Club,
Oh
and I got
God.
the Power Ranger. So of course, I'm on the team.
I yes, love the character of Julie without a doubt. The casting for this was really good. Also they hit it out of the park with Noel, and I feel like Noel first read and was going to be cast for Ben, and then they found Scott Speedman afterwards, and they told him they're going to switch it around, and he was okay with it. But it was very good casting.
I have to say back then I was probably more into Ben, but now I'm kind of like, no, I like Noel better.
This is the show that had the age-old question: Ben or Noel. And I mean,
Yeah.
like, t-shirts were made after the first season about it and sold because
Oh,
it was
really?
just such a huge argument. Oh, yeah. And I'm sure they sold tons of merch, and it was used for the bumpers and all that type of stuff too. So that was very catchy. And trust me, I've watched the show and family members too, and that's been the big question too. Ben or Noel, Ben or Noel.
So I never actually watched the whole series. Even during the first season, because it was set in college, and like I said, I was 12 or 13. I was
Sure.
more into like the high school stuff, so like Dawson's Creek, Buffy. So like I would watch it, but I wouldn't really pay too close attention. It was right on the edge of
Right?
Creek, so sometimes it would just be left on and I'd be listening to it. I wouldn't really be watching it.
Sure.
I definitely miss things. And then I think I tried to watch it again in season 2, and then the whole hair cutting fiasco happened, and I
Right.
was one of those people that tuned out when she cut her hair.
The loss of hair made the loss of fans happen, if we will. But also during that season 2, the WB made that drastic decision to shift it to Sunday night. And that
Oh,
Sunday night is kind of a hard viewership thing for maybe that age bracket and stuff like that they were trying to pull in. So I think that played into the loss too.
yeah. And then I kind of, when I knew that it was ending because they were promoting it as the final season,
Sure.
I think they did those like something we I don't really remember what happened, but they did something weird with the last 10 episodes. And I remember tuning in for that.
Yeah, they got an extra order from the WB. It was originally going to be a 17 episode season, just like season 3 was, and at the
Mhm.
last minute WB said no, we want 22, and they had already filmed what they thought was the last episode, and they're like, but it's done. And so they had to get creative, and they did. So what was also cool about that last season is they released a soundtrack of the music used in that season, and the first season also had a soundtrack. And to my surprise, me who watched a lot of season 1 on DVD, a lot of those songs were missing when I watched it on DVD versus
I
what
don't
was
remember
there.
this
And
one.
that was kind of sad. I don't know what I missed, but I did watch season 4 that way. And then when season 4 came out on DVDs, the songs were gone. I was like, huh. Just kind of like the age old thing with Knots Landing and stuff like that too. And I know Dawson's Creek has gone through it. When music rights get involved, a lot of things
Yeah,
changed. 90210, I know, is that same way as well.
so we're talking about the WB who was able to do that for Felicity and Dawson's Creek, but they can't seem to do it for Knots Landing. Just saying. Same
I
network.
know it is kind of funny. These shows can come out. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
can find a way to edit out stuff for clips. God knows you've talked about there's episodes of 90210 that have gone from being like what should have been like 38 or 40 minutes down to like, oh, it's a 31-minute episode now, but
Yeah.
they've still released it. So
Yeah. I guess it's better than nothing. Like give the fans something, but
exactly. People
but
want
all
that
right, cool.
continuum, and they want to invest, and they want to watch, and so give them the avenue to watch. And side note, I'll just put this out there, not really soap opera, but it was just announced that starting December 29th this week, the TV show Las Vegas with Josh Duhamel and Vanessa Marcel is going to be coming to Peacock, so it'll be streaming for the
Oh,
first time if you want to watch all 5 seasons of Las Vegas.
I wonder if they'll have the original music.
They won't. I bet you money they won't for the opening credits because it's an Elvis Presley song, and I think they only got licensed to use it for the pilot when it got reran or put on DVD, and then they
Okay.
swapped out the song. But through the rest of the series, I'm not sure how much music they had in it, so I don't think it should affect it. But that is one thing. If you did watch Las Vegas back in the day, I would expect to not hear the opening credits sound the way that they did when they originally aired on NBC.
That's interesting.
Yep, I just read that last night, so I had to share that.
All right, so well today we're talking about the pilot of Felicity, just the pilot exclusively. We watched that. So we do a little back and forth. We open up with her in her dorm room talking into a tape recorder, Dear Sally. And
Yes.
I have to say, every time I get a little chuckle to myself every time I hear Dear Sally because it makes me think of Sally's friend from Knots Landing.
Oh, there you go. True. That is kind of a little
Unrelated,
fun
but it just
time,
makes me think of that.
right?
So we don't know who Sally is at this point. We
No.
just figure she's just talking to her friend, which is a cool
But
way to
this,
communicate back then.
without a doubt, 25 years ago, and using a tape recorder to do it instead of these expensive long distance charges, she was recording a audio letter to her friend and mailing it off in the mail that way.
Yeah. So we kind of get a narrative of how she got there.
Yeah, she's kind of, you could tell she's a little bit flustered and bewildered with maybe this decision that she made. So we start hearing the backstory of her letter and
Mhm.
seeing the visual that goes along with it on how she got to this college.
Now, I remember watching this live. I actually
Do
looked it
you?
up and I read that it was viewed by like 7 million viewers, which is huge for the WB.
And without a doubt, they promoted that show heavily, heavily.
And I remember the graduation. And it
The high
seems that
school graduation, yes, for
her parents, probably more her dad, have kind of like planned her life out for her, where she's going to go to
without a doubt.
school, what she's going to
Hmm.
do as a career.
Yep.
And they probably always kind of controlled that, probably her extracurriculars and everything.
Yep.
So she probably always had like this anxiety and weight of like having to do whatever she was told.
Right.
And she doesn't want to do that. She kind of says everybody's excited about like what they're going to do, and she's like, I just don't have that feeling.
Well, she's got that look on her face when she's standing in line waiting for her name to be called. Like, this is really it. My life's gonna like kind of go out of my control now the minute I get that diploma, because my mom and my dad especially have planned out what my life's going to be and what those next steps are.
And then we see her look at Ben, who is her high school crush, that
Yep.
she's never spoken to, except for apparently at a blood drive. And I'm like, that's such a weird thing to say. I held his blood.
Right. Exactly. Oh, shoot.
And then I remembered how weird she could be.
Oh, yeah. She's just awkward, geeky, anything to fall in love. Like, if a shred of clothing would come off or whatever, you could tell she'd be one of those people who just stalk her, take it home, put it in a book, fold it together, and probably go and look at it once a day.
So then we see Ben, and it looks like it could possibly be his mother that he's arguing with.
Yes.
And when she walks away, Felicity gets the courage to go up to him and ask him to sign her yearbook.
Right.
Now she says, you could sign it anywhere. She's like, I just got it today. That's why it's empty. I'm like, that feels like a lie. You probably don't have friends.
Probably don't have many friends, if any friends. Yep.
So then he sits down on the ground and he basically,
Yeah.
it looks like he takes a whole page, which I did to one of my best friends. I took a whole page in the yearbook and wrote a whole thing.
That's so funny. And she was kind of surprised by that, because he's like, can you give me a minute? And she's like, yeah, sure. And he sits down and she kind of walks around awkwardly and she does the little bending on her ankles and stuff like that, which throughout the series, you'll see her do that a couple times when she's kind of nervous and bored and stuff like that and killing time.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got these isms that she made for Felicity that she was pretty constant and consistent with, which is pretty cool.
So after like not knowing what to do to keep herself busy because he's taking forever to sign the yearbook,
Yeah.
she kind of joins him on the ground.
Yeah. And she's kind of just glowing looking at him too, you know what I mean? Because let's face it, the man is attractive, so you can't help but be awestruck by just visually looking at him.
Yeah. And he actually says something very sweet, like, I don't really know you, but I've seen you around. And he wishes her luck. He said, I'd say keep in touch, but we never were in touch.
Right. He's like who he always said he's kind of always wondering what was going on behind her mind, or what was going on in her mind and things like that. So she was kind of like, she took that really to heart. You know what I mean? Like,
she's like, oh my God, he noticed me. He noticed me.
Exactly. This guy must really like me. You know what I mean? So she was enamored by that right away. Let's put it that way.
So then she asks him where he's going to college, and he just says New York. And then he's just like, see ya, or have a nice life, or whatever.
Well, he goes, and where are you going? And she goes, that's pretty unclear. Oh, she already knew where she was going to go. But just like right there in the moment, she kind of switched to a non-commitment because, we saw the scene cut and boom, she's pulling out papers and she's looking through all the places that she applied to. And sure enough, she had applied to the college that he's going to in New York.
But he just said New York. There's more than one college in New York, and she just
I know that's kind of a little flub that they kind of just like, and even the college that they sent them to was made up, and the producers even kind of talked about that. But yes,
probably because they couldn't use NYU, they had to just say
exactly. you've got to
Like
kind of just go with the
University of New York
flow.
instead of NYU.
Exactly. Kind of got to just go with the flow with this. And as an audience member, you accept what's kind of happening here with the story.
But maybe in their universe, there is only one college in New York, and that's why.
Maybe so. Maybe
But yes, yeah, so
so.
she just so happened to apply to the same university, and she had it in her files.
Right.
I think she was originally supposed to go to Stanford.
I think you're right. Yes. They had that all lined up. Daddy had
Um,
that lined up.
so she breaks it to her parents that she's going to go to New York. Her father is not happy.
No.
Um, he's like, "How are you going to pay for it? I'm not paying for it." And she's like, "I already took out a student loan." Like she was like, "I'm going."
Yep, exactly. And
And
he
he's like,
was
"Wait,
like, he basically said, I'm not going to financially support you for this.
yeah,
I had planned for you to go to school so you wouldn't have to go through this financial issue. But if you're going
mhm,
to change direction on me, nope,
yeah."
not paying.
Basically trying to bully her into staying on track the way he wants her to.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I forgot that she lived in a dorm. For some reason, I thought she was staying at Sally's place in New York. I don't know why. I just
Right.
made that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot she had a dorm. Um, so she has a roommate that she hasn't seen for days or weeks. Apparently, they don't speak.
Exactly. She's kind of just the bed's over there and that's it. And the roommates aesthetic is very different than Felicity's. Felicity's was very sweet and nurtured and homebody. We see like Marilyn Manson posters and skulls and bone sculptures and all this weird
Yeah.
stuff. And you're like, okay, wow.
Um, so Felicity at orientation, she's going to have her picture taken, and she's like, "Can you just make sure that it's good, that I look good, because I want to have a nice picture for the next 4 years." And then she
Right?
sees Ben with a girl, and she immediately is like scowling and like, and that's the
Totally.
picture
Like
that I take.
the picture, she's just like in shell shock and she's like, and that's it.
Which later on, I was like, "What happened to this girl?" Because now he's like all about Julie, but we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's upset, she's in class, and she's crying, and a girl named Julie that's sitting next to her notices that, and she writes her a note, "Are you okay?" "Yes, I will be." She checks off "I will be," and she writes thanks.
Right?
And
And then the professor that's talking or whatever has got kind of wild gray hair. And she follows up with the note and she's like, is our professor's hair on backwards? And it makes Felicity laugh. And they kind
mhm,
of get noticed by people. But you're right, sitting like 2 rows in front of them over to the side is Ben, who is absorbing all of this information the professor's given to him, too.
and in the cafeteria, they kind of like become friendly.
Yep.
Um, Somebody drops their food, and Julie's like, "Oh my god, I would be so embarrassed." And then Felicity notices Ben with the girl, and she's kind of just staring. And Julie's like, "Oh, who are you looking at?" And she points out Ben. So
Or
all this is,
doesn't she even say, I'll be right back? And that's when she goes and
oh,
gets
this is the
him?
awkward. Oh my god, I was so embarrassed for her. So she goes to Ben, and she basically pulls him out on the stairwell to have a conversation.
Exactly.
And this guy did not need to know. She says too much. She says
She,
too much.
yeah, verbally vomits a little bit too much about her feelings and why she came to New York and what he wrote in the yearbook, and she's fascinated by
She
him and
even
blah
like
blah
flat out
blah.
said like, "I thought I was in love with you" or something. Like,
Right.
it was.
And his
I was
face
like,
is
"Oh
like,
my god."
what? It's like I've had this is like my second conversation with you, and what?
It
Yeah.
was. I was like, "I don't want to watch this." I was like, "I'm so embarrassed." Like,
She's high school crushing big time. But she's trying to play it off like she's okay with it. She's good with it. She's got over it. Things are gonna be
but
fine.
it's just too much. Like, "Oh yeah, I was in love with you, but I'm over it now." Like, he doesn't need to know that. Like,
Right? Right?
if you want to be friends with him, just say, "Hey, we went to high school. You know, it might be cool to know somebody from home if you ever want to hang out, study together." Not, "Hey, I used to be in love with you, but I'm over it." So it doesn't have to be awkward. You just made it awkward by telling him
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so cringy, so cringy. So
And
then, Julie and her are walking, and then they introduce themselves by name, and I'm like, "You had all this interaction and conversation, and you're just
right?
now being like, 'Hi, I'm Julie. I'm Felicity.' What?"
We should be friends, by the way. Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny, but the name exchange finally happens.
Yeah. Um, so then, I don't know if this was before this or after this, but Felicity goes to see her counselor, which is Darnell
Thank you.
Williams.
Yay, Jesse from All My Children.
Um, I forgot he was on this, so that was
And
nice.
he's so good and he's so quiet and just kind of listens to her and stuff like that. He was on a few times on season one, but not much. And then they must not have been able to get the actor back for further seasons, and we see different counselors that Felicity talks to, but he was very good and very, defined.
It almost felt more like he was a therapist than a counselor, like a school counselor, because he was just, like,
Right?
listening to her and not, like, saying anything.
Exactly. Exactly. And she's talking about her parents and her decision she made and, trying to get some financial aid and just trying to make it work. But maybe this was a mistake type of thing too. But yeah.
And he asks her if she has any other interests since she's not going to medical school, and she says, well, she draws a little bit and paints, and she actually has, like, a little portfolio that she leaves with him to look at.
Right.
Um, I'm trying to think, like, what happened. Oh, so we meet Noel, the RA, the resident advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of taking a liking to her, kind of off the bat. He's cute.
Yep. Yep. He's right there on her floor and pops in and checks on her.
And he's like, if you ever need advice or you want to talk, I'm your guy or whatever. And she almost like immediately goes to him and like tells him about Ben. She's like, can me and Ben be friends?
Right. Right.
And he's like, yeah. He's like, you're just heightened emotions right now. You just moved here. You're like out of your element. He's like, give it a few weeks. He's like, you guys can be friends.
Yeah. Because then we kind of shift back to like their first week in class, and that professor's handing out papers that they did, and he's like saying how, I said, some of you do well, some of you won't. That's becoming apparent. And Ben's obviously not doing well, and he kind of pulls Felicity aside, catches her and Julie leaving the class and asks her for help and if she'll help tutor him.
Yeah. So that I guess they're studying in her dorm, and Noel pops in, and when he sees Ben there, I guess he gets a little jealous. So then he continues to keep popping in, and that's a little awkward also.
He gives her like, doesn't he give her some guide for like how to navigate the subway and stuff
Yeah,
like
like a little
that?
pocket map or something.
And she's like, thanks, and just kind of sets it aside. And I think he wanted it to be a moment between them, like, oh, I'm giving you this great gift that's going to help you with the city. And she's like, thanks. And she wants to get back to Ben. And he's like, he's coming up with reasons to come back in the room. And he comes back like 3 times. Like the second time he bugs her about the floor calendar. And she's like, but that's not due until next month, right? And he's like, yep, just want to remind you. And she's like, got it. He closes the door. Then he opens it again that 3rd time and he stands there. And he's like, oh, this one's just to bug you.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cute and adorable.
So now I don't know if I don't really know when this was placed, but at some point she's in her dorm room by herself, and her roommate does come. And it's kind of blurry. You don't really see her. You just kind of see her in the background in the closet. And then
Right.
as she's about to leave again, we get a focused facial of her face.
Yes.
And Felicity's like, hi, I'm Felicity, I'm your roommate. And she just kind of looks at her like, and she leaves.
Yeah. You can tell she was like, I thought I was going to have this place to myself or wasn't going to bump into you. And she was very
She's like
unimpressed.
unimpressed by her.
And my God, why is her name escaping me right now? This is sad.
Well, they didn't say it in the pilot, I don't think. And I don't remember her name either, honestly.
Oh my God, this is terrible. Yeah.
Is it Karen?
No.
No. It's not Karen.
I'm like Googling it, of course.
But so then we also find out that Felicity has a work study program. So she works like 3 hours a day, a couple times a week
at the university that she's attending, and so she
can
has access
to like students' admissions.
Yes.
And she's like, you're really supposed to read it. So she's like, because that would be wrong. And we immediately see her like looking through Ben's.
Right. She's reading like his application where he's kind of given a little bio on himself. And he's talking about how his brother passed away. His brother always was kind of like the star achiever. And he was maybe like 6 years younger or something like that. And then did he say his brother passed away from cancer? Is that what he said?
He said brain cancer. And he's like, and now I've achieved more than my brother because I'm older than he was. So now I've passed my older brother in life. So
And to
she's probably
back
like, "Oh
up,
my god,
to
he's
back
wounded.
up,
I can save him. My love will save him." Like,
yes, exactly. To back up, Felicity's roommate is Megan. There, I finally
Megan,
found it.
right? Okay.
Yes. Anyway,
I can't wait for the coffee shop to come into play.
right?
So, um, Felicity invites Ben to go studying with him and Julie.
Yeah.
And she tells Julie that after the fact, and Julie's kind of like awkward because she's like, "Oh, she's like, I don't really want to be a third wheel." She's like, "What's going on between you guys?" And Felicity's like, "Nothing, we're friends." And then she explains that they went to high school together. And
Yeah.
again, another like weird conversation. How is that just coming? She's like, "Oh, you went to high school together? Then you guys are just like that didn't come up when you first were staring at him at all."
Right?
When you
Right?
went to go drag him into the stairwell.
Well, I think Felicity's kind of muted on how much she wants to expose about this mad crush that she had on Ben. So maybe that came
Maybe
into
I just
play.
have a questioning personality, but I feel like I would ask these questions right
Right?
away. Like, "Oh, how do you know him?"
Right?
I would have said,
Funny.
"Hi, I'm Julie," like, in the classroom when I passed her the notes.
True. True.
Um, so then, Julie's like, "Okay, we're just friends, we can study, fine." Um, and then we get, like, an exterior shot, and it said Lucky Strikes, and I was like, "Oh my god, the bowling alley," but it looked like they were in a bar. It didn't look like a bowling
Yeah.
alley.
You're right. You're right. It definitely looked more bar setting.
Unless it was next door to Lucky Strikes, I don't know. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's not related. Maybe it's just called Lucky Strikes.
Maybe. Maybe.
Um, so the 3 of them are studying, and Julie gets up, I guess, to use the bathroom or whatever, and Ben makes it known to Felicity that he's kind of interested in Julie.
Yeah. And he's like, hey, I know you said you were okay with all this stuff, but would it be awkward if I asked your friend Julie out? And she's like, right away, she's like, no,
She's like,
that'd be
"No, she's great."
fine. And it's like she's processing this. It's like hitting her like a wave, and it's taken a bit to really hit her. And it's like once it hits her, bam, she's like red hot mad, and she goes over to confront him at his place that he's living at, and he's living in like a studio apartment type of place, probably with a bunch of guys. Because ironically, when she buzzes to want to get in, it's Sean, who we don't visually see,
Oh,
but
Sean, yeah.
he's the owner of the studio space. And um, Greg Grunberg, who played Sean, was insistent that they use his voice for that. He didn't, because they were going to use like some other actor or whatever, I think, for the pilot. And he got
Mhm.
cast, and he's like, "No, I want that to be my voice." And he was insistent on it. So we hear him, but we don't see him. And he buzzes Felicity in.
And, Ben initially is like, "Tonight's not really a good time," and she's like, "No, you will speak to me. I need to speak to you right now."
I
So he
know.
buzzes
And
her in.
she's like, "How could you do this? You made me fall in love with you." And he's like,
Ugh,
"What?"
it
I
was
mean,
so
when she said that, I was like, "What?" And he's like, he starts getting not hostile, but like he starts getting combative back to her. And he's like,
he's like, "How
"That's
did I do
crazy."
that?"
And lo and behold, Julie's there with him, and she's heard all this, and she comes out the other side of him, and she's putting on her coat and walks past them, and she's like, awkward. I don't want to be the girl in the middle of these two, whatever they are. And
Yeah.
she walks past Felicity, and Felicity's just sitting there staring at Ben, and she's kind of like, again, her mouth gapped open, and she just turns around and leaves.
So now she's decided, because she's made it messy for everybody, that she's gonna leave.
Right. And this is when she goes back and talks to her counselor again.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like, oh, it's probably best if I just go home, and I've talked to my parents, and I can miss the first semester and get caught up. I'll recalibrate, and well, things should
Yeah.
be back on track. And my parents are coming to town this weekend, and blah 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 blah. It's probably a good time. And he's kind of demure, and he's just letting her talk again. And then he's like, wow, well, I looked at your art, and you're really good.
Mhm.
And he's like, so maybe you should think about that. And so then
So
I'm trying to remember if before or after she meets with her parents, if she has a conversation with Noel and he gives her his list of reasons why she should stay.
I don't remember if it's before or after either. I just know that they did play a Sarah McLachlan song that it was played in every show in the 90s.
Yes, that was the one that they finally kicked out the money for, that they paid to use that song.
And they, like, used the whole song because they, like, spanned, like, 4 scenes.
Well,
Like,
and they would have the characters talk about Sarah McLachlan, so they kind of had to do it. You know, maybe Sarah gave them a deal, and bravo, Sarah. It's just more exposure for you. So,
Um, so while she's packing to leave, Ben comes to see her, and she had a package at her door. It was a response to her voice letter from
yeah,
Sally. Um, and she mentions who Sally is. Sally was her French tutor,
yes,
who apparently she always felt like she could talk to, and that's why she talks to her instead of writes to her. And
yeah.
apparently Sally had a fiance that died.
Yeah, a couple months before the wedding or something, it sounds like maybe he was in a motorcycle accident or something like that and it killed him. And so Sally just couldn't stay there and she kind of moved away to refine herself.
Yeah. Um,
And do you know who the voice of Sally is?
I don't remember.
It's Janine Garofalo, who's an actor slash
Oh,
comedian that's been in tons of stuff with Ben Stiller and different things.
that's
And
right.
Reality Bites was kind of a big movie for her, as well as
I think we
plenty
eventually
other
meet
things.
Sally in person, right?
No, we don't.
Oh, we don't.
Sally kind of drops off at season 3 and 4,
Hmm.
sadly.
Oh wow, I thought she actually like popped in at some point.
She didn't.
Okay. Um. So then she's having dinner with her parents. Oh no, no, no.
This is
With
good.
Ben. You gotta
Okay.
rewind. Ben. So he wants to talk to her, and it looks like they're on the rooftop. And he explains to her, oh, because in her messy
Right.
tirade at his place, she admitted that she read his essay.
That's
And
it.
he's like,
Exactly.
how
So
did
she
you
goes, I
read
know
my
all about
essay?
your, she's like, I know all about your brother, Jonathan. And he's kind of like, what?
Yeah. So on the rooftop, he admits to her that he's an only child
Yep.
and that he lied to get in, which I don't really think is illegal or an offense. He wrote an essay and they liked
Yep.
it and they accepted him. I'm also starting to think maybe Ben has a career in writing in his future because he wrote a whole thing in her yearbook and then he wrote this whole essay. So
True.
creative writing might be his thing.
Right. But when he's reading these books or whatever, he needs Felicity's help to try and understand what the whole scenario is. You know what I mean? It's kind of funny. But
You
yeah,
know, when they were
it was
studying and he was saying what he thought it meant, it almost felt like she was just like, wrong, you're wrong. But then when he said it, she was like, oh, maybe.
right. True. It's funny. But
But
he's got some backstory there that he's not shared yet and will kind of come out as the series goes on. But he basically was trying to ensure he could get as far away and go from the California coast to the New York coast to have some
mhm,
separation from his mom and dad. And you know, you're right. That's when they kind of look out and see the lights of the city too. And he's like, I can't wait to see the city when it snows.
mhm.
And that kind of
Um,
sticks with Felicity, and she holds on to that thought.
and that in some ways that's how they're similar because she kind of wanted to get away from her parents and what they wanted
Uh-huh.
for her. So
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of common ground there.
Yeah.
Um, so she ends up going to dinner with her parents, and her father's like, listen, you made a mistake. You saw a little bit of the world. You start in January. You'll pick up some extra credits and you'll be all caught
Yep.
up for your second
I've
year.
made a call. I've made a call. I've taken
Like
care
I
of
did in the
things. And
fall. And she's
yep,
like,
he goes, like
wait,
I did before.
what?
She's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, just like I did in the fall. I made a call to ensure that you'll get in and you'll be fine. And then Felicity's mom was like, and then we've decided you can have my car. And she sets down the keys with the key fob. And
Mhm.
Felicity looks at the red button. And what did it say? Panic.
Panic,
That's what it was.
panic.
And Felicity picks it up and she's listening, and her parents are talking, and she's placing her thumb over the word panic. And she's realizing this is a mistake. If I go home, I need to stay here. My parents are going to control my life. This is what I was truly trying to get away from. This wasn't maybe about Ben. This was about me having my own life and making my own decisions for myself. And she starts to backpedal out of it with her dad again right away. And he's frustrated. And he's like, again, I'm not going to financially support you. And he tries to emotionally blackmail her that way by like not being the money. It's kind of
Yeah.
bad.
And she kind of says, well, that's a decision you're gonna have to make. But,
Mhm.
also, did you
And
notice
then
the
she
real
goes,
crumbs on the table? When she put the
did she,
keys back down, there was real crumbs on the
yes,
table.
yes, exactly. And she goes, well, I think the thing will at least will be, it'll be my decision to make. So she is starting to like exert some independence instead of
Yeah.
having her parents control her life.
In some ways, maybe I was reading this wrong, but I felt like her mother was doing some eye acting, and it almost seemed like she was proud of her, but
She
she didn't wanna
was,
contradict what her husband was saying, but she was
right?
just kinda like she's scared for her child, but she's, like, proud of her, and I was like, "Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I'm not sure."
Mm. No, I think you're reading it right. I think the mom is kind of being like emotionally, she's being very inwardly supportive, and she's like, I get it. You go,
Mhm.
girl. You know what I mean? She's not saying the words, but she's like, she's not fighting Felicity versus the dad is definitely fighting what she's
Right,
doing.
right. So, Felicity decides to stay, we don't get to hear the conversation, but she sees Julie, and they hug, and they make up. Um
And then does Noel come and talk to her and say, here's like 5 reasons why you should stay? And he kind of like goes through them. And she's playing coy and just lets him say his little dialect. And then finally she looks at him and she's like, are you saying this because you like me? And he's
Mhm.
like, um, maybe, yes. So he like
He's like, "But my
softly
affection for you
admits it.
aside, this is why you should stay."
Yes. And so she's kind of, she's flattered, but she just kind of, she's like, oh, this is cute. You know what I mean? Like somebody actually likes me and I do have friends here and things of that nature too. So it's helping
Yeah.
her feel a little bit better about maybe she does need to stay.
I also think at the dinner scene is when she gets to say to her parents, "I can't wait to see the city when it snows," or
You're
whatever.
right. She repeats Ben's line, and that's kind
Yeah.
of funny. And her dad's just like, "What kind of a weird statement is that?" And it's like he's also career oriented, that he has no concept of what she's trying to go through her sense of self discovery.
Yeah. And then I think that's pretty much the end of the episode. We see her and Julie just kinda walking down the street,
I was gonna
and
say, doesn't she bump into her on the street and they end up
they
hugging,
hug.
and that's their way of making up about the whole
Mhm.
thing? And they're like, I don't want Ben to come between us. And she's like, oh, it won't. You know what I mean? And so they kind of go walking down the street arm in arm together.
Yeah. So that was a cute ending. I liked
Exactly.
it I liked it better than I remembered liking it. She's very cringy, and I feel like she stays cringy, at least for the first season.
Right. She kind of does, because it's that self-discovery, that first year of college. There's like a lot of change and you do get to exert a lot of independence, and there's a lot of self-doubt going on there. Again, the show has got so many isms. You know, we're going to see a lot of Felicity in sweaters and with the
Yeah.
hair tied back and stuff like that. We're going to see a lot of
There were
when
moments where she was walking on the street that it felt like that was shot just so that they could use it in promos. Like, she would be in slow motion, just, like, staring up at, like,
totally,
the sign or
totally.
whatever
Yeah.
while crossing the
Lots of
street.
slow motion stuff used on this show. Lots of whispering between Ben and Felicity, where you're practically like grabbing the volume on your remote, going, "What are they saying here?" Because they're kind of the horse whisperers when they talk to each other.
Especially Ben.
Yes. Yep.
Um, I liked it. I
I
wanna watch
enjoyed it
more.
a lot. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and they've only given us a bit taste of maybe some of these supporting cast actors, and they haven't even shown like Elena, who was big part of the show yet, because she
Mhm.
obviously wasn't cast. This was obviously a pilot that was filmed back in the spring and then got picked up by the WB, and they did a little bit of retooling and had to add a little bit more to the cast and stuff like that. But it was really a well done pilot.
And then there's the recurring character, I think he becomes a regular at some point, that owns the coffee shop.
Yes, he works there. He's the manager of
Oh,
it.
he's the manager.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, lots of good things to look forward to.
definitely. Definitely. It's a good show. It holds up really well today. It definitely has that whole college cycle and the emotions that people go through and the drama around it. So I enjoyed it.
Um, the way her and Julie became friends is it was such a simple, like, easy way to make friends. Like, I remember doing that in
Hmm.
high school, like,
Yeah.
with a girl that I became really close with. I was just like, "Oh, it's your birthday?" She's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Oh, happy birthday." I was like, "Imma sit here," and then we were, like, attached at the hip for, like, 3 years.
That's awesome. That's cool.
So, uh, but now we
Warm
have online to
fuzzies.
make friends.
Right? Exactly. Ta-da.
Did I forget anything?
I think it was a good synopsis. It was good. Like everybody that was in this pilot kind of lasted throughout the series, or somebody else didn't play them as they came in and out and back and forth. The only one that really wasn't is, you're right, at the very beginning, that was Ben talking to his mom. And when they actually brought his mom on for a speaking part, it was a different actress that played the role.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Well, also
So
they usually film pilots months, like probably up to like 6 months before the actual series goes to series.
without a doubt. So they didn't really know who and I don't even think they used Ben's mom until like season 2 or season 3, to tell you the truth. So
Oh, okay.
it was quite a while, because they didn't bring Ben's dad on until like season 3, and that was the
Oh,
late
wow.
John Ritter that played his dad. So yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Cool.
thank you for joining us for another edition of Queers and Soaps, Felicity style. As always, you can find us on all the socials at Queers and Soaps. And until next time, have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye guys.